Imagine standing on a steep, muddy riverbank. Below you, a swift, churning river. You are a Persian nobleman, a commander in the world's greatest empire, and you have chosen this ground perfectly. You and your elite cavalry have formed an unbreakable wall on the high ground, daring the enemy to attempt the impossible, to cross the river and charge uphill into the teeth of your lances. The invader, a young, arrogant king they call Alexander, has a smaller army and is now faced with a suicidal choice. His most experienced general is begging him to wait, but the young king ignores him. He lowers his spear, puts himself at the very front of his cavalry, and orders a charge that should have been a massacre. This is the story of that charge, the story of the Battle of Granicus, the day the world learned to fear the name Alexander. In the spring of 334 BCE, the fate of the world hung in the balance. King Philip II of Macedon, the man who had conquered Greece and forged the most lethal army on the planet, was dead. His dream of a great pan-Hellenic war of revenge against the Persian Empire now rested on the shoulders of his 21-year-old son, Alexander. To the Persian satraps of Asia Minor, this was a moment of opportunity. They saw a boy king, an inexperienced leader, whose own kingdom was unstable. They believed they could crush this invasion at the water's edge and put a swift, decisive end to the Macedonian threat. Alexander, having just crossed the Hellespont and symbolically claimed Asia for himself by casting a spear into its soil, was about to face the first and perhaps most critical test of his entire campaign. A loss here would not just be a setback, it would be the end. The Persian defense was masterminded by a council of the local satraps, the governors of Asia Minor. They gathered their forces, a formidable army of around 40,000 men. At its core was a powerful contingent of elite Persian cavalry, considered some of the finest in the empire. But their most valuable asset was a large, disciplined force of Greek mercenaries, battle-hardened veterans commanded by the brilliant general Memnon of Rhodes. Memnon, a Greek in Persian service, understood the Macedonians. He knew their strengths and weaknesses. He argued for a scorched earth strategy. Avoid a pitched battle with Alexander's superior infantry, and instead retreat inland, burning crops and villages. This, he argued, would deny the Macedonian army supplies, starve them out, and force them to retreat without a single major engagement. It was a sound, cautious, and intelligent plan. Let us know in the comments, do you think Memnon's strategy would have worked if they had followed it? But the Persian satraps were proud, arrogant men. The idea of destroying their own rich lands and estates was abhorrent to them. Arsaces, the satrap of Phrygia, declared he would not allow a single house in his territory to be burned. Driven by a desire for personal glory and a profound underestimation of their young opponent, they overruled Memnon. They decided to seek a glorious, decisive battle. They would make their stand at the Granicus River and annihilate Alexander's army as it attempted to cross. They chose their position with care. The Granicus River, though not particularly wide, had steep, treacherous banks and a swift current. They deployed their main force, the elite Persian cavalry, directly on top of the riverbank. This was an unusual and risky tactic. Normally, cavalry would be held back to exploit a breakthrough. But the satraps believed their elevated position would allow them to rain down javelins and then crush the Macedonians with a downhill charge as they struggled out of the muddy water, disorganized and vulnerable. Behind them, On the flat ground of the plain, they placed their superb Greek mercenary infantry as a reserve. When Alexander and his army arrived at the Granicus in the afternoon, he immediately saw the Persian deployment. His most trusted and experienced general, the veteran Memnon, was horrified by the enemy's strong position. He strongly advised Alexander to wait, to make camp and attack at dawn the next day. He argued that a frontal assault across the river, uphill, against a prepared cavalry line, was reckless in the extreme. This was a moment that would define Alexander's leadership for his entire career. He listened to the cautious advice of his elder and then completely rejected it. He scorned the idea of waiting, declaring that the Hellespont would blush for shame if, after crossing a sea, he was to be frightened by a mere stream. He knew that any hesitation, any sign of fear, would be interpreted as weakness, both by his enemies and by his own men. He would not give the Persians a single night to grow more confident. He would attack, and he would attack now. I'm curious to know where you're watching from. Let us know in the comments below. Does this kind of decisive leadership still exist today? Alexander quickly arranged his own forces for the assault. On his left flank, he placed his allied Greek and Thessalian cavalry under the command of Memnon. Their job was to act as a pinning force, engaging the Persian right and preventing them from maneuvering. In the center, he positioned the unbreakable heart of his army, the 6 divisions of the Macedonian phalanx, ready to cross the river and engage the Persian infantry reserve once the cavalry battle was decided. On the right flank, Alexander assembled his trump card. Here he placed his elite light infantry, the hypaspists, his personal Agrianian skirmishers, and the finest cavalry in the world, the Royal Companion Cavalry. And in a move that electrified his men and terrified his enemies, he placed himself at the very front of the lead squadron. He would not direct this battle from the rear. He would lead the charge himself. The battle began not with a full-scale assault, but with a clever feint. Alexander ordered a small, advance guard of cavalry and light infantry to charge across the river first, upstream from his main position. This sacrificial force was immediately swarmed by the Persian cavalry on the bank, who converged on the point of attack, believing this to be the main assault. The fighting was brutal, and the Macedonians were driven back with heavy losses, but they had done their job perfectly. They had drawn the attention of the Persian command and fixed their best units in place. While the Persians were distracted, Alexander made his move. He led the companion cavalry in their iconic wedge formation, not at the point of the first attack, but diagonally across the river, aiming for the newly weakened center-left of the Persian cavalry line. With a loud war cry, he plunged his horse Bucephalus into the churning water, his men following him without hesitation. They scrambled across the river and up the steep, muddy bank, a chaotic, desperate climb into a hail of javelins. The moment the companions hit the top of the bank, the battle descended into a brutal close-quarters cavalry melee. The Macedonians, with their longer, tougher cornel wood lances, had a distinct advantage over the Persians with their lighter javelins, but the fighting was a furious tangle of men and horses. It was here that Alexander's life was nearly cut short at the very beginning of his journey. He charged at Mithridates, Darius's son-in-law, and killed him with a single spear thrust. But as he did, He was attacked by two other Persian satraps, Rhodes and Spithridates. His own spear shattered. Rhodes struck him on the head with a battle axe, a blow that sheared off the crest of his helmet and cracked the helmet itself, stunning him. As Rhodes prepared to deliver the killing blow, Spithridates raised his scimitar to strike from behind. In that split second, one of Alexander's commanders, Clytus the Black, galloped in and sliced off Spithridates' arm, saving the king's life. The death of several of their commanders and the sheer, unstoppable ferocity of Alexander's personal charge shattered the morale of the Persian cavalry. Their line broke. First in the center, then across their entire front, they turned and fled in a panic-stricken rout. The Macedonian cavalry, now in control of the riverbank, relentlessly pursued them across the plain. With the Persian cavalry gone, their Greek mercenary infantry, who had been held in reserve and had watched the entire disaster unfold, were now left alone and exposed on the plain. Alexander, showing a cold, calculating ruthlessness, reformed his forces. He brought up his phalanx, which had now crossed the river and completely surrounded the mercenaries. The mercenaries, professional soldiers caught in a hopeless situation, tried to negotiate a surrender. But Alexander was in no mood for mercy. He saw them not as honorable opponents, but as traitors to the Greek cause for fighting for Persia. He refused any terms. He ordered his phalanx to advance, and what followed was a horrific, one-sided massacre. The surrounded mercenaries were annihilated, with only a few taken prisoner to be sent back to Greece to work in the mines. The Battle of the Granicus was a total and overwhelming victory for Alexander. In a single bloody afternoon, he had destroyed the Persian army in Asia Minor and effectively eliminated all the satraps who opposed him. He had achieved this through a combination of audacious risk-taking, brilliant tactical timing, and inspirational personal leadership. The cost was minimal. Perhaps just over 100 Macedonians were killed. The Persians, by contrast, had lost thousands of their best cavalry and their entire mercenary infantry. The gates to Asia Minor were now wide open. Alexander had passed his first great test, and the world had been put on notice. The impossible charge at the Granicus was the spark that lit the fire of Alexander's legend. It was a victory born of supreme confidence and a genius for war that defied all conventional wisdom. It set the stage for a campaign of conquest that would change the world forever. If you were captivated by this story of courage and audacity, please hit the like button and subscribe for more epic tales from history. And now I want to hear from you. Was Alexander's charge at Granicus a work of genius, or was it a reckless gamble that almost cost him his life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.